Knowle, North County, Dublin in Ireland. A quiet and rural area with a low crime rate and a small community of just 400 people. It's beautiful and serene with stunning views and a wonderful sense of community. Monday, the 4th of October 2004. At around 5:30 a.m, Joe O'Reilly left the family home, Lambay View, to go to work at Viacom Outdoor Advertising on the Bluebell Industrial Estate, where he worked as an account manager. He left his wife of 13 years, Rachel, at home with their sons, who were 2 and 4 years old. Later that morning, Joe sent Rachel a message saying, "You and the boys sleep okay? Wish Jackie a happy birthday for me, please. Kiss, kiss, kiss." He got no reply. He then left her voicemails between 11:52 a.m. and 1:45 p.m. At 1:15 p.m, Joe had received a call from their son's daycare saying that Rachel had failed to pick him up at 12:30, like she always did. He called Rachel's phone and left her a message, asking if someone else had been due to pick their son up. He called again at 1:24, saying he was worried about her and she needed to call him back. But there was still no response from Rachel. Joe set off to get his sons and called his mother-in-law, Rose Callerley. He told her he hadn't heard from his wife all morning, and his calls to the home phone and her mobile had gone unanswered. He asked if she could go to the family home to check on Rachel and make sure everything was okay, whilst he travelled to collect the children. Joe called Rachel's phone again, saying he was driving down the motorway and had spoken to Rose, who also hadn't heard from her, and he begged her to call him back. Joe phoned Rachel's youngest brother Anthony to tell him that he hadn't heard from her, and that she hadn't gone to the creche when she was supposed to get their son. Family members tried calling the home phone and her mobile too, but all the calls rang out. Rose had a feeling that something was seriously wrong. This was not like Rachel, so she set off to check on her daughter. When she pulled up at the bungalow, she immediately had a sense of relief as Rachel's car was in the driveway. The patio door was open. The house was silent. Some of the kitchen drawers were open and items were scattered across the floor. In the living room, the videos were all dumped in a pile. It looked as though the house had been ransacked. She then went to Rachel and Joe's bedroom. Rose found her daughter's lifeless body. She was lying on her back in a pool of blood, with the upper half of her body twisted. There was so much congealed blood that Rose said she was unable to determine if her daughter's face was on its side or if she was face down. Blood covered the walls, the ceiling, and there was even blood spatter in the bathroom. When she touched her, she said Rachel was as cold as marble. A neighbour said she heard Rose screaming. Rose ran to her bag to get her phone and call the police. She then called one of her sons, Declan, to tell him the horrifying news. Declan said he was going to come to the house, and so was Jim, Rose's husband. Joe got to the house at 2:30 with the children, and Rose told him she had found Rachel's body. He ran into the house shouting her name. When he came to her body, he said, "Jesus, Rachel, what did you do?" Rachel's best friend Jackie was a nurse and she went to the house. She too checked Rachel and confirmed there was no pulse and she wasn't breathing. Rachel's father Jim soon arrived, but was told by a police officer to not go inside, as the scene was too horrific. When the first police officer got to the scene, Joe went up to them in the garden and said he had been in the house and touched Rachel's body to check for a pulse, and said that he had moved a box near to where her body lay into the boys' room. He said he hoped he hadn't destroyed any evidence. When Joe was spoken to by the police, he had an alibi. He said he had been at a bus depot in Broadston, and it seemed unlikely that he would have been able to travel all that way to the house and back in the time frame given. So, who would have wanted Rachel dead, and why? Rachel Callerley had been adopted as a baby, as had her 4 other siblings, by their parents Jim and Rose. The family was incredibly close. Rachel always made time to catch up with her parents and siblings. her 3 brothers, Anthony, Declan and Paul, and her sister Anne. Rachel was athletic and played softball, even holding a softball world record. She was described as a live wire and someone with a really good heart. Rose referred to her as a brilliant ray of sunshine who was well behaved as a child, but also adventurous, throwing herself into everything she could. Her father Jim said that she was someone who would give anything a go and loved being independent, with a knack for DIY and decorating. When she was 17, she met Joe O'Reilly, who was 2 years older than her, while they worked at the same department store. He said the first thing he noticed about her was her height. Rachel stood at 5'11" and Joe was 6'5". He had asked her to go on a date with him several times, and she turned him down, but Joe continued to ask. Joe overheard that she played softball and one day turned up at her practice session and joined her team. They were both successful and even had the potential to turn pro. Their relationship then became a romantic one. At the top of the Eiffel Tower, Joe asked Rachel to marry him, and a couple of years later the pair were wed. They then welcomed 2 sons. They moved to their new house, a bungalow called Lambay View, in Norwell in 2003. It was the perfect place to raise their children. Rachel loved being a mother, and everything she did was for her 2 boys. Joe O'Reilly had also come from a close family, with him being the second eldest of 2 boys and 2 girls. But his circumstances were different. When he was young, the marriage between his parents had fallen apart, and his father had left the country and moved to England. Joe was described as an incredibly confident man, and he was determined to get ahead in the advertising industry, despite not having the qualifications. He was so persuasive and confident with clients that his lack of credentials didn't appear to matter. He would get into work early and leave late, determined to make his goals come to fruition. When they moved into their 3-bedroom bungalow, Rose did have some concerns. She was worried that Rachel would be lonely living there, as Joe was away from home so much with work. But Rachel seemed to be delighted with the move. She became well known in the area, as she sold Avon and Tupperware, and within a few weeks of moving in, she held a barbecue so she could meet and get to know her new neighbours. In spite of wanting to appear to be a family man, some of Rachel's friends said Joe was more of an absent father, and Rachel was left to do a significant amount of the parenting on her own. He would always leave the house early in order to go to the gym, and often wouldn't be back until well into the evening. Rachel was more of a private person who didn't talk about her marital problems, but some could sense there might be issues between the 2 of them. The now retired Detective Inspector Pat Murray was then a detective sergeant at Balbriggan Garda Station. When he arrived on scene, as he was a qualified scene of crime examiner with plenty of experience under his belt, he went in to see exactly what they were dealing with. In all his years in the police, he was shocked by just how brutal this killing had been. It's a sight I will never forget. My God, she was pulverized. Her hair was matted in blood. You could see down to her skull. You could see there was severe force used to inflict that. So the poor woman had no chance whatsoever, absolutely none. It was savage, cold, just unbelievable. Her father Jim said that Rachel would have fought for her life with everything she had, and he believed that the killer had attacked her from behind. Although it had initially appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, one thing immediately stood out. There was money in the home that hadn't been taken, €800 in a box in the kitchen and 400 in Rachel's bag. Based on what he found, Pat didn't believe that this was a random attack carried out by a stranger. It's highly unusual to see someone in the state I saw Rachel O'Reilly, having administered such a beating. The viciousness of the assault was a pure display of hate for this woman. If you hate someone that much, you're going to know them. Pat Murray believed the robbery had been staged. They set up an incident room back at the station, and more than 40 officers were sent out to conduct door-to-door inquiries and search the local area to try and uncover any potential clues.
Gardaí carrying out a preliminary investigation outside the house where the remains of a mother of 2 were found this afternoon.
News soon began to spread that a brutal murder had been committed. People were stunned. Based on the scene of the crime, the police believed she had been caught totally off guard by the attack. Searches were carried out to try and find the murder weapon, but they proved fruitless. But the searches did uncover something interesting. Half a mile away from the house, a plastic bag was found containing jewellery and a camera, 2 items that Joe had said were missing. It was looking less and less like a burglary. Joe was questioned that evening. He said he left for work as normal and headed to the gym beforehand. He was seen on CCTV leaving work at 8:07 a.m, and he said he was going to a bus depot in Broadston, and his colleague Derek Querney said he would meet him there. Part of Joe's job was checking the advertisements on the side of buses, so he would have to travel around. At 8:45, Derek set off, and when he got to the depot, he called Joe to ask him whereabouts he was. Joe said he was in another part of the depot. Derek was questioned, and he confirmed he had spoken to Joe on the phone when he got to the depot, and he had been told that he was there, just in a different part of the site. When he first made that statement, Derek was unaware that Rachel had been murdered. When he questioned Joe, Pat asked if there was anyone who was known to not like Rachel, or maybe if she had been seeing someone else romantically. What Joe said left Pat confused. Joe replied, "No, neither of us were having an affair." Pat hadn't asked if Joe was having an affair, so why had he felt the need to clarify he hadn't been? But then the truth came out. Joe had been unfaithful, telling Pat, "It's over now, I don't want anyone to know." He said he had had a brief fling with a woman called Nikki Pelly, and it hadn't been a serious relationship. He had told Rachel 3 times that he hadn't been having an affair. He said that the couple had had an argument the day before she was killed, and he had slept in the spare room. The day after Rachel was found, Nikki was questioned by the police. She confirmed what Joe had said. There had been a relationship, but it wasn't a serious one. The same day, the police received the results of Rachel's post-mortem. It revealed that she had been bludgeoned with a heavy object, such as a dumbbell. This was one of the items that Joe had said was missing from the property. Her skull had been fractured in 2 places, and her face, shoulders and neck had multiple lacerations. Defensive wounds on her arms showed that she had made an attempt to fight off her attacker. It was determined that she had been struck between 6 and 9 times. Blood was also found in her airways, which would have made it very difficult for her to breathe. A couple of days after the murder, a search of Joe's office at work was carried out, and his laptop was seized. A series of emails had been deleted, but the police recovered them. Joe had been talking to his sister Anne about their marriage, in which he revealed his deep hatred for Rachel, using vulgar language and expletives to refer to her, even saying that she repulsed him. When the emails that had been so derogatory about Rachel came to light, Rose said the family was bereft that any person could be spoken about in such an appalling manner. News of the marital problems was a massive shock to Rose too, who said, "He was a loner, he was very strange. I never thought, though, there was anything bad about him. I thought he was a very good husband and a very good father. At family gatherings, he would tend to break off from the adults, and nobody really knew a lot about him." The house was cordoned off for 9 days, giving the scene of crime investigators the chance to thoroughly go through and document everything. Whilst the investigation continued, the family prepared for her burial. They all decided to write letters that were to be put into the coffin with her when she was buried. The family left Joe with the undertaker to say some private words to his wife, and when one of them went back in, Joe said, "You can put the lid on it now," with Jim saying it sounded like he was talking about a tin box, not his wife's coffin. Her parents felt these were very strange and detached comments for an allegedly traumatized widower to make. Her family then gathered for her funeral. Following the burial, her parents received the cards that were attached to the flowers that people had left, and one of them stood out. All Joe's card said was, "See you later, Joe." Joe's behaviour had become increasingly strange and unusual. The police had told him he could now go back into the house, and he needed to go through everything and make a note of anything he thought had been stolen. He reiterated what he had said. Some of her jewellery, a camera, and 2 towels were gone, as well as one of the dumbbells, but the jewellery and the camera had now been accounted for. He also decided to invite Rose and Jim over, even though the house hadn't been cleaned, and it still had their daughter's blood everywhere. He said that there was a sense of peace and that it would be good for them to visit. Rose didn't want to go back into the house, but Jim said that if it had helped Joe process what had happened, maybe it could help them. To their shock, Joe began reenacting the murder and speculating as to how she had been bludgeoned, even pointing to the blood spatter on the ceiling. He showed them the blood on the walls, adding that he thought maybe the killer had stepped over her body and then cleaned up in the bathroom, whilst listening to Rachel as she choked on her own blood, and that the killer had gone back into the room to, quote, finish her off. When they went back downstairs, Joe was adamant that they listened to the voicemails he had left for her that day. Rose said she could hear Rachel's voice in her head saying, "He did it." Later that night, Rose spoke to Jim about what she was feeling. Jim was distraught and asked her not to talk to anyone else, saying that people reacted to grief in different ways and that Joe was just behaving as if he was in shock because he was so cool and calm. I couldn't speak to Jim about it after that because he would get so upset, but I said, I'm not going to say it to you again, but I'm just asking you to be open-minded. Joe also started speaking to the media. He said the family were worried that the killer could possibly strike again, and he went on television to appeal for information.
Why? Why Rachel? Why then? What did she do?
I mean,
your opinion, to
I
deserve
ain't even gonna
this?
say that.
Are you going to do it again? If you are, you need help. What you've done is wrong. You've taken away a very young life for no good reason. I feel I know you because you had to kill her. You couldn't leave her alive to identify you. So it's a matter of time before you're found.
Journalist Jenny Friel interviewed Joe at the house, and before long, he asked her if she wanted to see the bedroom Rachel had been murdered in. She said this took her by surprise, and when he pointed out where the blood had been and where she was found, Jenny said that although she was not squeamish about most things, this made her feel sick. Another journalist, Kieran O'Brien, went to the house 12 days after the murder and took photographs, including one of Joe sitting in his kitchen. Joe said that the police were treating him as a suspect. Kieran asked him if he believed he was a suspect. Joe said yes. Kieran said that he had never had an encounter like that in his whole career. People from within the community and the couple's friendship circles called Joe to offer their condolences and asked if there was anything they could do to help. He would offer to show them the scene of the crime and what he thought had happened, something that was later referred to as the murder tours. On the 22nd of October, Joe appeared
like he was reliving
Rose
it.
as a guest on The Late Late Show with Pat Kenny.
Look at his
primetime talk
eyes.
show
Oh
in
my
Ireland.
god.
Joe's behaviour backstage set alarm bells ringing. Pat Marry spoke to the staff who worked on the show, and they said he didn't appear to be a man who was grieving. He helped himself to food and refreshments and spent most of his time on his phone, whereas Jim and Rose couldn't even look at a cup of tea. Joe's appearance did nothing to stop people's ever-growing suspicions, and what follows is a clip from that episode.
Based on the situation you both found in the house, I mean, did you get the sense that she'd been taken unawares, that this was someone that perhaps she trusted, or...
Yeah, I think so. Where the murder happened was in the bedroom, which is the very last room of the house. So it's the room where you're least likely to bring someone you don't know because you're cornered. My view as well would be, and again it's just my view, it's not a police theory, it's just my own personal belief, is that she knew the person, because why else would you kill her? If it's a violent robbery, why go to the extreme of murdering the person unless they can identify you? And that's why we've talked about this and practically nothing else for the last 3 weeks. We just feel it's someone she would have known or someone she could have identified.
The show had offered to put him up in a hotel, but he had said he had to go and meet a client, but this was a lie. He instead went and visited his lover, Nikki. He was on the television to appeal for information about the murder of his wife, and he spent the night with the woman he had been having an affair with.
Ain't she know he was
When
having
news
an
of the
affair
affair
though?
broke in the media, the interest only increased. Journalist Jenny Friel said that, looking back over her notes from the interview with him, he hadn't actually mentioned loving his wife or how much he would miss her. He spoke about how devastated the children were, but nothing about his feelings about it. Despite Joe and Nikki's efforts to play down their relationship, it was becoming clear that this had been a long-term affair over several months. They had met whilst working at the Viacom advertising agency. After going for a night out at a pub, they swapped email addresses and mobile phone numbers to keep in contact. He would tell Rachel he was away for work, and he would instead go and see Nikki. They spoke on the phone every day and would meet each other 2 times a week, all while he vehemently denied any affair to Rachel. 6 weeks after Rachel was murdered, 2 arrests were made. Nikki Pelly was taken into custody for withholding information, and Derek, the colleague who had given Joe his alibi, was also arrested. When Derek was interviewed, he said he couldn't be too sure about the timings, and that they could be off by 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
Nikki also had a different version of events to the one she had previously given. She admitted that their relationship was far more serious than she had initially said, and that Joe had asked her to play it down to the police. Both were released without charge.
What? After saying that they were
The next
released
day,
without charge? That
Joe
makes no
O'Reilly was
sense.
taken into custody. He refused to answer questions, offering no comment throughout. The police had no murder weapon or forensic evidence. They did have CCTV footage showing a car similar to his in the area at the time, but the number plate could not be made out. As a result, 2 days later, he too was released without charge. The family then asked the police if the letter Joe had put into Rachel's coffin could be looked at, believing he had maybe written something incriminating on it. An exhumation order was granted. March 8, 2005. Rachel's body was exhumed, and Joe's letter was removed. It was chemically treated, and using infrared technology, they could finally read what he had said. It was 5 pages and included the following passage. Rachel, I love you so very, very much. I cannot think what I will ever do without you, and I don't want to think. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and you will never be replaced. This is the hardest letter I've ever had to write for reasons only we know. Rachel, please forgive me. 2 words, 1 sentence, but I will say them forever. The note was considered to be ambiguous and not enough to have him arrested again, although for her family this solidified their belief that he was guilty. In December 2005, 14 months after the murder, the police were still trying to build their case. The car that had been spotted on the CCTV footage appeared to be the same make and model as Joe's, a blue Fiat Marea. Despite having the footage enhanced, it still didn't clearly show the license plate. So, the officers devised a plan to prove that it was Joe's car on the footage, and nobody else's. They searched the database for all other Fiat Marea drivers in the country, and it came back with 2,500 matches.
Dang.
Although they could not eliminate every single driver of that car in Ireland, they were able to rule out enough that it made it far more likely that it was Joe's car. The police also
I ain't
contacted
gonna lie, that's kind
O2
of.
to see if they had any recordings of calls that Joe had made on the day his wife had been murdered.
I don't know how I
Whilst they
feel about that. If you could do that, that's touchy right there.
couldn't provide that, they did have something interesting. They brought in an engineer from France, and he was able to determine which masts Joe's phone had been close to throughout the day. They were then able to plot his whole route. And the more the police looked into where his phone had been, the more damning it became. At 5:45 that morning, Joe had left to go to the gym, located on the outskirts of the city, where he was due to meet Derek. He went to the petrol station and filled up his Fiat Marea. Whilst there, he received a call from Nikki. This was the first of 8 calls that day, and they stayed on the phone for 28 minutes. Something else he had failed to mention. He went to the gym where he had a shower before heading to work. He sent an email to another colleague, Kieran, where he said that his phone would be out of service for the majority of the morning, and he arranged to meet him at 2 p.m. Despite him telling Derek that he was in another part of the depot, analysis of Joe's phone showed he had actually been headed in the direction of his family home.
Oh, yeah, he did that.
Whilst his phone was out by the house, Joe didn't make a call or text, but he had got a call from Derek at 9:25
And he
and
didn't
a
answer.
text from a different colleague at 9:52. The phone had pinged off of a tower at Murphy's Quarry. This was the nearest mast to the house, and the quarry could even be seen from the property. The car that the police believed was Joe's was caught on CCTV passing the quarry. If Joe was at Broadston, where he had told police he was, why therefore was his phone pinging off of the Murphy's Quarry mast, less than a mile away from his home?
Because he
As
did
Joe
that
had made
shit.
it clear he always had his phone with him, this added to the weight of their case. At 9:59, the car was seen going past the quarry again, driving away from the home. It was only after this that the phone was placed in Broadston, somewhere he said he had been all morning. At 9 a.m, Rachel had left with the two boys to take them to the crash and school, and 3 minutes later CCTV filmed her passing the quarry too. The same camera showed her coming back at 9:41 a.m. It was believed she was murdered shortly after arriving home. When the text was sent to Rachel asking if she had slept okay, the police checked the corresponding time on the CCTV cameras, and these also picked up a blue Fiat Marea being driven 10 minutes after the text had been sent.
Bro, he
They
did
drove
that
the route from where the
shit.
text had been sent from to the CCTV camera, and it took about 10 minutes. Joe arrived back at the office at roughly 12 o'clock. When he arrived back at work, something stood out to one of his colleagues. She noticed that he appeared to be a bit flushed and red in the face, and it looked as though he had been crying. She asked him if everything was okay, and he said it was. She told him that he looked terrible, and he immediately panicked and sped off towards his office. He stayed there until the call came in that Rachel had failed to pick their son up from the crash. When Nikki had been released without charge, it emerged that she had told a friend it was hard to continue to lie to the police. Nikki told her that Joe had said if he killed Rachel, he could get away with it. She was brought back in for questioning, and she admitted that he had said this, but she said she didn't believe he was being serious. The police later found out that Rachel had told a friend about a huge argument she had had with Joe. She had told him he needed to change his behaviour or leave. It also emerged that just 4 months before Rachel had been killed, social services had received an anonymous tip alleging that Rachel was not fit to be a mother. The claims were absolutely unfounded. Joe and his sister Anne emailed back and forth about the incident with social services. Anne used various swear words to refer to Rachel and asked how she had got out of this one. Joe replied saying that social services confirmed what he had thought. If they were to divorce, he likely wouldn't get full custody and be able to cut Rachel out of the picture.
Here it goes.
In
Always
March
the reason.
2006, Derek Querney was brought in by police and questioned. During one of the interviews, due to the stress, Derek actually vomited into a bin in the corner of the room. He then said that the statement he had made previously couldn't have been correct, and that the timings could be wrong. Joe was arrested for a second time. Pat Mary was hopeful that they now had enough to charge him, based on all of the phone analysis and how this tied to the CCTV footage, as well as the elimination of the other drivers of the same car. But the Director of Public Prosecutions said they needed more.
Shortly before 10 o'clock tonight, the man who's the Gardaí's chief suspect in the killing of Rachel O'Reilly was released without charge.
Pat Mary recalled how Joe had put his thumb up to him when leaving, and how he didn't seem to care at all about the seriousness of the situation or what had happened. On the second anniversary of Rachel's murder, her family held a mass for her. It was held outside Lambay View, but the children did not attend, and neither did Joe.
Gift of life to me. And
Rose Callally singing at her daughter's anniversary mass, showing just how strong she has remained since Rachel was murdered 2 years ago.
Oh, I feel that everyone is behind her, definitely, yes, yeah.
and hopefully it'll get justice for her, because that's the big thing now.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Analysis of mobile phone data revealed more damning evidence. Joe's phone had pinged off of a mast close to the family home when Rachel's murder had taken place, contradicting his statement that he had been at work miles away at a depot. And the more the police looked into where his phone had been, the more damning it became. The evidence was finally enough. October 2006. Police arrived at Joe's mother's house. Pat Mary went into the kitchen, put his hand on Joe's shoulder, and told him he was under arrest for the murder of Rachel. He said, "He turned and faced me. The blood drained from his face and he went white as a sheet. He was not expecting it."
Detective Sergeant Pat Mary told the court that at 10:55 a.m. he formally charged Mr. O'Reilly with the murder of his wife, Rachel O'Reilly.
He entered a plea of not guilty. June 25th, 2007, Joe O'Reilly went on trial. The media and public interest was unprecedented. Queues formed every day as people tried to get into the public gallery to watch the trial. Rachel's family had not seen him in 8 months, so coming face to face with him again at the court was an especially painful experience. Jim said he had a fierce arrogance, and Rose described him as detached. The defense argued that the prosecution had based their case on innuendo, spin, and allegation, and that it was nothing more than circumstantial. But what came out showed that the image Joe had been desperately trying to uphold, that of being a happily married family man, was nothing but a lie. The evidence was strong. The phone analysis, the emails insulting his wife, him lying about where he was, the downplaying of the affair, and his behaviour after the fact painted a damning picture. The emails and texts between Nikki and Joe were presented to the court and showed that they had planned to start a life together. The texts that had been exchanged revealed that Joe often told Nikki he loved her, and he would imply that the boys were her children, referring to one of them as our boy. This was providing a motive for wanting Rachel out of the picture. He had attempted to tarnish her character, calling her a lazy mother who was heavy-handed with the children. It also inadvertently came out that the one who had made the anonymous report to social services
Was him.
containing the allegations that were determined to be utterly unfounded was Joe's own mother.
Wow.
The court was stunned by these revelations.
Wow.
Rose Cannelly was very concerned when she heard her daughter
What a
Rachel
mother would do
had
for her
picked up
son,
her
man.
son from the creche on October 4th, 2004. She drove to her home in the Knoll, North County Dublin, and discovered the body of her 30-year-old daughter, barefoot, lying on the floor. She emotionally told the court how she knelt beside her, talking to her and rubbing her arms, before frantically trying to call the emergency services on her mobile. She said Rachel's husband, Joe O'Reilly, the man accused of her murder, arrived at home shortly afterwards. She said his first words to his wife were, "Jesus, Rachel, what did you do?"
Throughout the trial, Joe kept his head down, looking firmly at the floor, showing no emotion. On the occasions he did look up, it was to talk to his lawyers, whilst he laughed and joked. It was put to the court that at 9:45 Rachel had arrived home, and Joe, her husband of 13 years and the father of her children, was lying in wait for her in the bedroom. When she went in, he launched his attack, bludgeoning her repeatedly. After beating her, it's thought that he took a shower to wash the blood off, before putting his clothes and towels into the washing machine. He then attempted to ransack the place and make it look as though they had been broken into. He then went and put the allegedly stolen items into a bag and dropped them by the stream. When the creche had contacted him to say that Rachel hadn't arrived to pick their son up, Joe stalled and spent more time there than necessary. All of this was to ensure that Rose would be the one to find her daughter's body. The testimony of pathologist Professor Marie Cassidy, the former state pathologist of Ireland, also showed that when Joe had reenacted the murder, including how the killer had likely heard her gurgling and choking on her own blood, and then gone back to strike her again, he had been telling the truth. The court also heard from Fiona Slevin, She had testified about a conversation she had had with Joe on the same day Rachel's funeral was held. She said he had told her, "I don't know why they're looking in the fields. The murder weapon is in the water." She added, "It was like he said something he shouldn't have." She told the court he then said, "Well, if I did it, that's where it would be. There's water all around, that would get rid of all the DNA." On the 11th day of the trial, the phone triangulation was put to the court. It showed how his phone had been tracked all the way to the vicinity of his house when he said he was at the bus depot on the morning of Rachel's murder. It was a groundbreaking set of evidence. Never before had a murder trial used mobile phone triangulation in this way, or
Yeah,
to
that's
such
crazy.
an extent. And 2 days later, more shocking evidence came to light. The emails were read to the court.
The jury was given details of an exchange of emails between Joe O'Reilly and his sister Anne on the 9th of June 2004, 4 months before Rachel was killed. The packed court was quiet as the emails were read out. Afterwards, Rachel O'Reilly's mother, Rose Callally, and her sister Anne were in tears.
On the 14th day of the trial, Nikki Pelly testified.
Ms. Pelly told the court she and Joe talked about being together permanently in the future. When she was first interviewed by Gardaí, she told them it was just an affair. She said Joe told her she should say that. Asked why, she said it was because if she said it was a relationship, it would give him a reason to kill Rachel.
The way Joe had courted the media painted a picture of a cold individual who was desperate to control the narrative. Joe had convinced Rose to go on the Late Late Show, saying it was the police who believed it was a good idea. The opposite was true. Joe had been told to disengage and not talk to the media anymore. One of Rachel's brothers would later say, "He liked that feeling. He enjoyed people's reactions. In my head, it's not human, not normal. But that's the way he is. I honestly believe he is a psychopath."
You have to be.
The 21st of July, 2007. The jury returned their verdict. At the Central Criminal Court, Joe O'Reilly was found guilty of murder. He was given a life sentence.
The emotion outside echoed some of the most extraordinary scenes ever seen in this court. The jury brought in a unanimous verdict after 9.5 hours of deliberating. The court
9 hours?
The Callally family jumped.
It took y'all 9 hours to know this man did this shit?
Supporters cheered as Joe O'Reilly
Like, come
was driven
on.
to Mountjoy jail in a prison van. Rachel's family watched as their daughter's killer was taken away to begin his life sentence.
We'd love to thank everybody, the police in particular. They have been so brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And the prosecution team and all the people of Ireland that have been behind us with cards, letters, prayers. It all meant so much to us. And at long last, we've got justice for our darling Rachel.
Joe O'Reilly attempted to bring his case to the Court of Appeal but was unsuccessful.
No,
Following
bro.
this, he tried to take it to the Supreme Court. This was also refused in November 2016. It was also reported that he had abandoned plans to take his appeal to the European courts. In May
You don't get to
2015,
do
an
that.
appeal lodged by Joe to have his conviction declared a miscarriage of justice was refused. He has been refused parole at least 3 times, and Rachel's family will continue to fight to ensure that he remains in prison. In 2012, Joe's brother Derek said that Nikki still loved Joe and was standing by him, believing that he was innocent, as did he.
Come on,
"The Joe
man. Y'all
I
know
know
what
is
y'all
not a
did.
scumbag," he said. "He is most definitely not a wife beater, and he most definitely isn't a devil. The Joe O'Reilly I know is anything but the ultimate evil. I've never had any reason to doubt him." Nikki Pelly continued to visit him weekly in prison, believing in his innocence. It was reported in 2022 that Joe and Nikki had ended their relationship for a second time, with the first time being in 2017. Sources say they remain close and best friends. More tragedy would hit the Callally family when, in 2010, Rose and Jim's other daughter Anne passed away at the age of 31, following a battle with cancer, with just 2 weeks between her passing and the anniversary of Rachel's death. Rose described how deeply affected Anne was by her sister's death. As soon as our Rachel died, our Anne used to arrive up at the door at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. She was petrified and she was afraid of him. She never rested. She always thought she could hear noises, someone trying to get in. For those left behind, life after Rachel's murder has been a painful journey to navigate. Rose published a book about her daughter's case titled Remembering Rachel, the story of Rachel O'Reilly's life and brutal death. She said, "I don't want anyone to ever forget what was done to Rachel in any shape or form." The tragedy of this case is perhaps best summarised by the words of her mother Rose. "I'd love her to be remembered as this bubbly person that we had for such a short time, that touched everybody's hearts. I wish I could go back. I'd give anything to be able to hold her, even just for 1 minute." For those of you that like to listen on the go, we now have our episodes in podcast form, and you can now find this via the link in our description box or by searching Truly Criminal Podcast on your podcasting platforms.
Do love the British accent.
Laurel, in Yellowstone County, Montana, is a place described as scenic and rural on the outskirts, with gorgeous hiking routes, camping spots and lakes, and busy, bustling and vibrant at the centre, with something always going on.
Always.
Parades and small festivals, great shops and restaurants, and a big sense of community spirit. Just over 7,000 people live there, and in 2019, one of those people was 57-year-old Laurie Bray. Laurie worked as a runner in one of the local casinos, and by all accounts lived a peaceful and quiet life, keeping to herself and just enjoying being at home with her 2 rescue dogs, Mac and Nicky. She was from a big and close family. She had a son called Justin, who she never went a day without talking to, 5 grandchildren, lots of brothers and sisters, and 8 nieces and nephews. Laurie was an animal lover, especially dogs, and as well as Mac and Nicky, she would donate to rescue centres and charities, and would often look after other dogs before they found permanent homes. Her boss and former roommate Kathy said Laurie was probably the sweetest, kindest and most gentle person. She said she was softly spoken, with a beautiful spirit and a welcoming smile, happy to help anyone and always someone people could turn to. Her son Justin said this could sometimes be a double-edged sword, and she could be too trusting of people, never seeing the bad in anyone, even when they gave her a reason to question them.
That really is a double-edged sword. Because sometimes, sadly, people aren't the best.
September 30th, 2019 was a fairly typical day. Laurie had been working the closing shift at the Cedar Ridge Casino, and just before midnight, she clocked off, locked up and left, heading straight back home as she was back in early the next day. Several hours later, October 1st, 8:30 a.m. Employees at the casino noticed that Laurie was unusually a no-show, but she hadn't phoned in to say why. Around the same time, her boss Kathy was driving into work herself, down an empty and secluded road, with nothing to see but fields for miles. She spotted what she thought looked like Laurie's car. It was parked at an odd angle on an intersection, and it didn't look like anyone was inside. Laurie didn't even live close to this area, and with no shops or other houses around, it made no sense for her or her car to be there. Kathy pulled over but kept her distance and didn't get much closer to the car, instead deciding to call Justin. She asked him to go to his mother's house, wondering if she was just panicking unnecessarily. But little did she know, independently from her call, Justin also thought something felt odd about that morning. He hadn't received his usual morning call from his mother, which was strange. Justin headed to her house, ringing her phone as he did so, but the silence was deafening. When he got there, he noticed her car was not parked outside, making the knot in his stomach tighten further. He let himself in and was alarmed to find her 2 dogs, Mac and Nicky, unattended with no signs of being fed, which he knew his mother would never let happen.
Oh yeah, no,
A look
something
around
up.
her house turned up nothing. Her bed was neatly made, there was no indication that breakfast had been eaten that morning, and everything just felt eerily quiet. Whereas it was possible Laurie had made the bed and washed everything up before leaving, it felt more like she hadn't actually made it home from the previous night. He called Kathy back and they both agreed to go and check out the car together. Justin confirmed right away that it was his mother's 2003 Chrysler sedan. The sunroof was open, a handle and indicator were broken, and inside the floor on the back, he could see her purse and her car keys.
Fuck.
Her iPhone was also on the floor, lighting up as it was receiving calls. Although Justin wanted to open the car and start properly looking, he knew in his guts that this was a job for the police and no one else.
More.
They called 911. When authorities started inspecting Laurie's car, they found bloodstains covering more than half of the seat in the back, and there was a muddy shoe impression on the passenger's side door. They also found Laurie's clothes scattered about too, including her underwear, which appeared damaged, as if they had been forcefully removed. The hooks on her bra were bent, and some of the clothing had blood on it as well. It was all pointing towards a violent and troubling scene having taken place. Laurie Bray was now a missing person.
Yeah.
Everyone sprung into action, many in the community knowing her well and wanting to help. Friends started posting on social media, with one person typing, "She would never leave her dogs. They are her world. Someone has to know something. No lead is too small. And I ask that everyone please pray that she is found safe." People started organising their own search parties as well, and everyone was out and looking for Laurie. It was instantly a case that captured the media as well as the public, as it was just so unusual for something like this to happen in this area. The place where her car had been found was grassy, muddy, and the field seemed to go on forever, so looking for clues in a location like this was a big undertaking.
Dozens of friends, volunteers, and authorities scouring open land north of Laurel in an effort to find something that will lead them to 57-year-old Laurie Bray.
An active investigation now underway. Bray was last seen leaving her Laurel workplace early Tuesday morning. Her car found hours later and miles away.
And that's where searchers gathered today. Q2's David J. was at the scene, has the very latest from the sheriff. David?
We're out here at the intersection of Buffalo Trail Road and Laurel Airport Road, close to the cemetery. Family and friends came out at 10 o'clock in the morning to search for her, about 60 to 70, according to Sheriff Mike Linder. We're also standing fairly close to where her car was found, and we had a chance to talk with the sheriff about the disappearance and what he knows so far.
We're out here right now searching because this is where her car was. We don't have any evidence or any other indicators that she might be out here. It's just out of an abundance of caution that we want to make sure she's not out here in serious need of help. And so that's why we've got all these volunteers. We got information that this female was last seen probably between right around 12:30 in the morning, seen leaving work at the casino. We had a deputy that actually drove by here just on routine patrol and saw the vehicle and stopped and checked on it as well. But the way the vehicle's registered, we had no idea who it belonged to. So that took a little bit of work. Right now we've got detectives writing search warrants and working on some of the technology aspect, phone tracking and that type of stuff.
Sheriff Linder expects the search to go into the evening until about dark. They've been searching all around here, the fields over there, and he says that they'll wait for more information to come in and maybe change that up just a little bit. In Laurel, David J. reporting for Montana's news station.
Given the terrain, the searches were difficult anyway, but as the darkness started to creep in, things became impossible. Authorities told the volunteers to stop and wait until morning, which people reluctantly did. Police asked Kathy for the camera footage from inside the casino. She was not only able to give it to them, she was also able to say who most of the people were and give them their details so they could start interviewing them. On the night she had last been seen, Laurie had been closing down as usual, restocking, cleaning and the likes. 2 women briefly started talking to her at the bar, and Kathy said she knew them. They were regulars. Another person then popped up who worked with one of the women. Kathy said his name was Diego Hernandez. Diego ordered a drink, and Laurie asked to check his ID before serving him. A few minutes later, Laurie could be seen pointing out the clock to him, indicating the casino was closing and he needed to leave. There was a very brief conversation before Laurie carried on with the close-down duties. At 11:20 p.m, Laurie grabbed her bag, locked the door and headed out. The casino was now closed and her car was parked just in view of one of the doors. She briefly walked back for a second, seemingly to talk to somebody, before getting into her vehicle with someone. Police quickly established it was 22-year-old Diego in the car, and at the time he got into the passenger side, he was the only person apart from Laurie still on the premises. Not a single other soul was around. Detectives needed to know why he had left with her, and if he had seen or heard anything that night, perhaps another customer that may have been lingering or acting oddly. Just before midnight on October 1st, Diego Hernandez was found at his address. He confirmed it was him on the cameras, and that Laurie had very kindly offered to give him a lift home after they got chatting in the casino. He said he only went to the casino on a whim because he could get free drinks there. He arrived at about 9 p.m. and stayed for a couple of hours using a few machines and chatting to people.
Oh shit.
Diego said Laurie drove him to his house. He said thank you and goodbye, and then he went to meet up with a friend, ready to carry on the party. He said he hadn't seen Laurie since he watched her drive away, and it was simply a passing encounter and a kind gesture from a stranger. But there was something that was standing out to police that they couldn't ignore. Diego's face, hands and torso were covered with fresh scratches. One officer asked about this, saying it looked like someone had fought him off and that it was a little concerning. But Diego said the scratches had happened 2 days before when he got into a fight with a friend called Nick after going to a local strip club. He said Nick had a ring on and it had cut his face. He was very matter-of-fact and calm, confident in what he was saying, and showed no signs of being dishonest. With this, the police left.
Bro, what?
They found Nick, and he admitted they had had a scuffle in his car. He said that Diego had suddenly started freaking out and was agitated. Nick said that at one point he had put Diego in a headlock before pushing him out of the vehicle, but he said there was no scratching involved, and he was shocked to see the state of his face. He had no reason to lie. He had already admitted to pushing him about and kicking him out of the vehicle, but the scratches were simply not linked to this incident. Despite what Nick had said, which did match parts of Diego's story, the fact was police had no other leads apart from him. Diego was still the last known person to have been with Laurie, and by his own admission, was in her car. The CCTV from Cedars Casino couldn't confirm whether the scratches were there at the time, but more footage from another bar just hours before showed that he had absolutely no marks on his face at all. Early on the 2nd of October, the search party started back up and continued throughout the day. But at 7:30 p.m, detectives received the call that they had been dreading. A man had been out riding his ATV in a wooded area when he made an awful discovery. He had found the body of a woman lying naked on the ground. He didn't have to get close to tell that she was badly beaten and already dead. Police felt strongly they knew exactly who it would be, but made no announcements.
A woman missing, a body found, and a lot of questions tonight surrounding what Yellowstone County authorities are now calling a homicide.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder not confirming the female victim found east of Laurel last night is that of 57-year-old Lori Bray. But the search for the missing Laurel woman has been called off.
However, just as word had travelled about Laurie being missing, it was now travelling that an area was swarming with police and forensics, and soon it was confirmed.
Sheriff Mike Linder says the medical examiner determined the body found east of Laurel Wednesday night is that of missing woman, 57-year-old Laurie Bray.
She was 57? She looked fantastic.
No suspect in custody is not easing the minds of some Laurel residents.
They had found the body of Laurie Bray just under 2 miles from where her car had been dumped. She was at the bottom of a ditch, completely naked and in the fetal position. She was covered in abrasions and bruising. There was blood in her nose and in her hair, swelling around both of her eyes. She had a swollen lip and several broken ribs. Her cause of death was later confirmed as strangulation, but the examiner noted she had also suffered blunt force trauma to the face. A sexual assault kit was used, and although blood was found, no semen was. Some of the marks on her body indicated she had either been dragged down the hill or pushed down it, not that she had been killed there. They now knew that she had probably been killed inside her own car and then transported there. Near to her body was her little necklace with a cross on it, and close to this was a fairly good imprint of a shoe. This print appeared to match the print found inside Laurie's car. Laurie's death and the state she had been found in was shocking. Officers said the level of violence and brutality was astonishing, commenting that whoever had done this was, put simply, a monster. Colleagues and friends were at a loss as to who would want to do this. They said Laurie was loved by the regulars, had a great reputation in the community, and had never spoken about having any issues with anybody. Police did get a couple more potential leads when it came to light that she had been involved in some abusive and controlling relationships in the past, and maybe these men needed to be looked into. But Laurie's exes, for various reasons, were completely ruled out.
We've heard from several people in the community concerned there could be a killer walking the streets of Laurel. Well, Sheriff Linder tells me if detectives had enough evidence, they would have someone in custody. But regardless, that doesn't mean you can ever let your guard down.
The once so tight community was now broken and scared, fearing that this might not be an isolated incident, and maybe something could happen to someone else. One of the residents described Laurie's death as profound and detrimental to the community as a whole. Nevertheless, everybody put their worry aside to come together for Laurie's family and friends, raising money to help look after her dogs, support Justin, and donate towards the funeral costs. The police were able to find several locations where Laurie's phone had pinged between midnight and 3 a.m. The casino was one, where her car was found and where her body were found, and one near to Diego's house. Diego's house and that surrounding area had pinged just before the location where she was found at, by which point she would have already been killed, and this was pretty damning evidence. More interesting still, while he was in the other bar in the hours before he was at the casino, he spent the evening pressuring random women to drive him home, including the lady working behind the bar. She refused several times and said she felt very uncomfortable with his harassing behaviour. On October 4th, detectives executed a search warrant at Diego's residence. They collected the clothes he was seen wearing that night, some of which looked like they had been bleached, as well as freshly washed. This stood out immediately, as his room was full of dirty laundry. They also found a pair of soaking wet Nike shoes that had also just been washed. The tread of the shoes matched the print that was found inside Laurie's car and near to her body. Detectives started going through Diego's phone, and it turned out that just a couple of hours after Laurie had been killed, he made some interesting searches online. How long do investigations last? How long do FBI investigations last? Is there a limit to how many years they can investigate someone? He went to the station and gave the authorities a DNA sample, and then, after this, he changed his story. He said that he and Laurie had spent some time talking in the car, and they were getting on well. They then smoked some cigarettes and ended up having sex near his home.
Nah,
but he
bro.
swore he hadn't seen her after that.
Nah.
Officers still didn't have enough to hold him, so he was allowed to go home.
That's
Everything was
crazy.
processed quickly, and before long, they had everything they needed. Diego's DNA was a match to the DNA found on Laurie's body, and under her fingernails.
Obvious.
Diego was called back in, where he would change his story for a final time. He was now claiming that he and Laurie had actually been in a relationship for over a year, and they were just keeping it a secret, and that was why he had lied so much. She always wanted to keep it quiet, but at the same time, I don't know how to explain it, but every time that me and her had a relationship under profile, she always told me, she said to keep it quiet. Like nobody needs to know about this, he said. But detectives went back over a year on both of their phones, and there was no evidence to suggest they had ever even talked before. This was corroborated by the casino cameras that showed Laurie asking for his ID and only talking to him to tell him they were closing.
Right.
Their phones had never made contact or been in the same locations until that night.
Damn, man.
On October 8th, just a week after Laurie Bray was reported missing, Diego Hernandez was placed under arrest in connection with her death.
Some breaking news.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder says a suspect is now in custody tied to last week's murder of a Laurel woman. 22-year-old Diego Hernandez was taken into custody at his home in Laurel around 8 o'clock tonight. He's now booked into the Yellowstone County Detention Center facing a homicide charge.
It has been 1 week since the 57-year-old Bray left her late-night job at the Cedar Ridge Casino and never made it home.
Large impact on the community. Everybody's fears, of course, are heightened. Awareness is heightened. You've seen incidences of where things that might have been mundane before now, get looked at it at a whole different light. We're large enough to have resources, but we still have that small town feel. Very safe place to live. You have crime that's possible in any place.
2 days later, he was charged with deliberate homicide. This came as such a shock to everybody in the area. Diego was well known and well liked. He always seemed polite, friendly, and quite quiet. His friends said he was down to earth and genuine, and this had left them blindsided. The police's theory was this. Given all the CCTV that seemed to show Laurie getting into the car with him willingly, and not under duress, indicated that Laurie had offered to give him a lift home, as he had originally said, likely feeling sorry for him given how late it was. Once near his house, Diego had attempted to initiate something sexual, and Laurie refused. A struggle then broke out and he viciously attacked, sexually assaulted, and eventually strangled her. And the reason he was leading with the claim the pair had had consensual sex was because he knew the second his DNA was taken, they would make the link, so decided to change the narrative.
The level of violence and brutality suffered by Ms. Bray is astonishing. This was a violent crime, and her end was violent and awful. Additional charges may be forthcoming as additional evidence comes forward.
Diego would never say what happened and what, if any, conversations took place, but he denied ever harming her. As word started to spread that an arrest had been made, a vigil for Laurie was held in her favourite park to walk her dogs. Money was still being raised and a lot of people were donating to the charities she once did so much for.
Bray was described by many tonight as a kind, loving woman who would do anything to help her friends. One in the crowd carried a sign saying, "Laurie is loved," and some wore purple t-shirts with the message, "We will always love you," written on them. Christy Salvinson was Bray's next-door neighbor for 3 years. She didn't realize Bray had so many people that cared for her.
I've come to learn that everybody in this community knew her and loved her. She was the greatest person. She would give her shirt off her back to freeze so you wouldn't freeze. That's just the type of person she was. The Laurel community, I've learned since this has happened, is a very tight-knit community. Everybody's just coming together to light a candle in her honor and her memory.
Diego Hernandez pleaded not guilty, and the now 24-year-old's trial began in March of 2021. He was maintaining his innocence and still claiming the pair were in a secret relationship, something which angered her family and friends, as they said this was simply not true. In opening statements, Diego's defense attorney suggested that Laurie's abandoned car may have been disturbed or contaminated before being searched by law enforcement, which meant the evidence in it had to be questioned. And she mentioned that methadone was found in her system, something she did not have a prescription for. They put forward this to suggest if she was using methadone and not telling anyone, she could easily have been hiding a relationship with Diego, a theory the prosecution found ridiculous and nonsensical. The prosecution had a strong case and asked for DNA and forensic experts to testify.
The jury walked through the crime scene and brutal murder of 57-year-old Lori Bray with dozens of photos and testimony tying a 24-year-old Laurel man to her death.
Yellowstone County Sheriff's detectives collected evidence from Bray's car, including the leather from the back seat, along with fingernail clippings that came from Bray's body. DNA supervisor for the state crime lab, Joseph Pasternak, ran the DNA tests and found traces of Hernandez's DNA inside Bray's fingernail clippings. Hernandez's attorneys tried to poke holes in the DNA evidence by questioning the crime lab's peer review process. The defense noted that the peer review given to the crime lab's reports doesn't rerun the tests. Rather, the peer review is only a second look of the report done by other crime lab staff.
This to me almost looks like they've reached the discoloration that was present on the photographs. Obviously, still there. Some of the markings down below here, some stains. And then the backside, again, the same discoloration. Could be washed or bleached, possibly.
Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office Detective Troy Chabinaw utilized Verizon Wireless RTT data to determine where Bray's phone was on the night of October 1st. RTT stands for Range to Tower, which is what Verizon uses to connect cell towers with cell phones and determine their location. Chabinaw was also able to pinpoint where Bray's car was found and the general area where her body was located. Cell phone geolocation analysis expert Michael Fegley also took the stand, concluding similar findings. He created a video representation using Google Earth to also show where Bray's phone was the morning of October 1st. The data that was collected from Hernandez's phone did not offer any useful information for detectives. Chabinaw suspects that Hernandez's cell service had been ended prior to being picked up with Bray. A list of Bray's phone records were obtained, determining that from a year prior to Bray's murder, Bray and Hernandez had no contact via messaging or phone calls.
A side-by-side picture of Hernandez's scratches next to Bray's beaten body is shown to the jury. The image is too horrific for television.
Tiny Lori did not stand a chance that night.
They said the DNA found in Lori's car, on her clothes, and under her fingernails had a 1 in 60 octillion chance of matching someone other than Diego. An octillion is 1 followed by 27 zeros. They also confirmed that the trousers found in his home had been bleached just a few hours after Lori had died. They presented the phone data too, which also gave a clear timeline, of which Diego was at the centre. After several days, both sides rested their cases, and just 2 hours into their deliberations, the jury returned.
They said, bro, like, yeah, dude.
We have the following unanimous verdict. To the charge of deliberate homicide, guilty. Dated this 22nd.
Diego Hernandez was found guilty. Before he was sentenced, he asked to take the stand himself. Things then took a sharp turn that nobody was expecting. The man who had been denying anything violent had happened for well over a year sat down and said, "I did it. I killed Lori." The room was stunned. The judge said he had never seen this happen in his 4 decades in a courtroom. That day, Diego Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 35 years to serve before he could be considered for parole. There is no indication whether or not he has made plans to appeal.
Why would
Lori Bray's
someone like
case
that
deeply
even be
affected many
eligible
people,
for an
those that knew her well and those that had never met her
like
before.
genuinely? What would
The
that
community
help?
felt a collective sense of loss.
Who would that
and one
help?
resident said it really changed a lot about the closeness and safeness everybody had always felt. They had all lost a really special person. Kathy said of Lori, "There's nothing she wouldn't do for anybody, even if it caused a hardship on her. She was just a very tender, loving soul. No matter what anybody did, she saw the good in everybody." Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope you found this video interesting. If you'd like to support our channel and help us to continue to make content, please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. It helps us so much and we really appreciate it. January 7th, 2015. Police receive a call requesting that a welfare check be carried out on a 26-year-old mother of two, Erica Crippin Crosby. Her 7-year-old girl Amira had not been met out of school, and Erica was always prompt in the playground to pick her up. Everybody was in agreement that her not showing up was alarming. Something was very wrong, and the search for Erica was now on. Just 24 hours after the search had started, the missing persons case would quickly turn into a homicide investigation. "26-year-old Erica Crippin Crosby lived in Mount Laurel with her family. After losing her mother when she was 13, her two aunts had raised her, and the three of them were extremely close. Family was everything to Erica, and everybody said that being a mother was her favourite thing in the whole world. She had a daughter, Amira, from a past relationship of almost a decade, and a 3-month-old baby girl, Kaylee, with her new husband, Kyle Crosby. Erica's family said that Kyle loved Amira like she was his own, and the family dynamic seemed perfect. Erica's friends said that she was funny, animated, smart and sassy, exaggerating everything she did and making jokes at her own expense, just to make everyone laugh. She loved to entertain and be social, but she also enjoyed quiet nights in with her young daughters. As well as being a busy mother, she was working hard on achieving her dream of becoming a doctor, as well as working in a hospice caring for people. She was always on the go, never slowing down, and always pushing and challenging herself. Erica and her husband of almost a year, Kyle, had actually known each other since school, but started speaking properly years later in 2012. He reached out to her on Facebook, and the spark was instant. Erica said she loved his ambition. When they started dating, he was really driven and hard-working, and this matched her personality well. He was the founder of a fitness company, and the pair loved working out together. 2 years after meeting, they married and moved into a new apartment. Erica soon found out she was pregnant with twins, and the pair were over the moon. Erica's uncle said, the white picket fence and the puppy, that's all they were missing. Tragically, however, one of the twins didn't survive, but little Kaylee did, and Erica called her her miracle princess. Several months would pass, and the cracks were beginning to show in the couple's relationship. Erica and Kyle were definitely not without their issues. Kyle had started using a lot of drugs and would disappear frequently. Erica was forever trying to get him to stop and be present with his family. But the minute things seemed to get better, they would go back to how they were shortly after. The police had been called to the house several times for domestic disturbances, but it had never gone any further in the way of charges. Erica eventually put her savings towards paying for rehab for him, and everyone said that although she was trying her best to help and get their family back to how it was, she was mentally and physically exhausted. December 30th, 2014. Erica had a tradition that New Year's Eve was always spent with her girls, so Kyle and Erica decided to go out and celebrate the night before, having a nice meal and some drinks. Erica documented everything about her life online, and at around 11 p.m, she uploaded a photo of the couple to Facebook and set it as her profile picture. They were smiling and happy, enjoying their evening together. The next day, on what was New Year's Eve, Erica's Aunt Sonia answered the phone to Kyle. He told her that Erica was going out again, and he asked if she could help watch the children. She said this was strange, knowing it was Erica's tradition to spend the evening in with her family, and everyone she would normally have gone out with hadn't heard from her. Kyle phoned back later, saying that everything was fine, and she didn't need to come over anymore. Several hours passed, and Erica's uncle got another call from Kyle. Kyle said he was getting worried, as he had phoned Erica several times, but was getting no answer. Her family started trying to call her too, but they were also met with silence. The hours ticked by into New Year's Day, and when her aunts got no text or call from Erica to wish them a happy new year, they knew something was wrong. January 2nd, 2015. Kyle posted a status to Facebook, asking if someone could look after the girls. Surprisingly, Erica's family then received a couple of texts from Erica's phone, but something about them didn't sit right with them. They all had an instant uneasy feeling, as the messages did not read or sound like her at all. She was still not answering her phone when it rang, and her social media was a ghost town. She posted every single day, without fail, where she was, what she was doing, and tagging who she was with. Everything from her daily workouts and how many assignments she had to do, to her late night snacks. But since her post a day before New Year's Eve, there was no activity whatsoever. When Amira wasn't collected from school and the police were called to do a welfare check, everybody felt sick to their stomachs. On January 7th, when officers arrived at the couple's apartment, they found baby Kaylee alone in the bathtub, fully clothed in a soiled diaper. Police immediately suspected there was improper childcare going on. Family members then turned up at the apartment too, and said that it was in total disarray. There was a smashed window and broken glass on the floor, food and rubbish scattered around, furniture was overturned, and everything was everywhere. Erica's purse and keys were still inside, and despite the freezing cold temperatures, her coats were all there too. Everybody said she would have been horrified at the state of her home. There was no way she would walk away from the children, and not a chance that she would leave them in an apartment like that. Kyle was sat on a chair, and he appeared to be high on something. Given the state of the home, and little Kaylee in the bathtub, the police asked Kyle to come in and make a statement. Amira's father Hameen came and picked her up, and Kaylee was taken in by Kyle's mum Jo. Hameen said that Amira was very smart and perceptive, and it was heartbreaking to know that she knew something bad had happened to her mother, but, the same as everyone else, she had no idea what. At the police station, Kyle wasn't really making any sense, and told officers that he had taken some painkillers. He told them he hadn't actually seen his wife since New Year's Day. He'd tried to get in contact with her, but to no avail, and he had no idea where she might be. He filed a missing persons report, and the search got underway.
A young mother of two from South Jersey has been missing since December 30th. She was last seen with her husband at a restaurant and bar in Cherry Hill. Action News reporter David Henry has the latest.
Yeah, 26-year-old Erica Crippen Crosby lived here with her husband, Kyle Crosby, and her 2 daughters. She has not been seen since just before New Year's Eve.
We're just trying to get Erica back home, back to what we know. Like, this is too much. Too much.
Erica was last seen with Kyle Crosby at this pub in Cherry Hill the night of December 30th. She posted a profile update on her Facebook page later that night, and that's her last post. Previously, she posted just about every day, several times a day. That's when the family reported her missing. They say she would never leave her kids behind if she up and left.
She would never do that to her own children. She would never.
We're worried. Wherever she at, come home. Let us know something. Anybody that knows something, let us know. I mean, we're very sick here.
Tonight, loved ones gathered outside of Erica's apartment in Mount Laurel to pass out flyers and to pray for her safe return.
We need Erica to come home safe to us right now, Father God.
It's not like Erica to just walk out the house and leave her kids. She loved her kids.
Erica's family believes something is terribly wrong.
As well as the detectives, Erica's family and friends were conducting their own investigation. In the harshest and coldest conditions, and through all hours of the day and night, they looked for her. Her best friend even quit her job so she could spend every day searching for her. Given everything that they knew about Erica, her constant communication, her presence as a loving mother, her social media updates, and her keys and purse being at home, authorities informed the family that things had escalated fast and they were now treating her case as a homicide. A few days later, police returned to the couple's apartment and realised that Kyle was gone, and so was Erica's Ford Taurus. They tracked down Kyle's mother Jo, hoping she would be able or willing to tell them where he was. Perhaps he was out looking as well, or maybe he'd gone to work. She was open and forthcoming, saying she hadn't actually spoken to her son in a week, and, as well as Erica, she was concerned for his safety too, given the stress he was under. And Kyle's boss confirmed that he hadn't been in work for a couple of days, which was unlike him.
Law enforcement sources say they are also actively looking for Crosby. He may be in Erica's car, a cranberry red Ford Taurus with primer paint on the front passenger door and fender. Her family says the car had been parked outside her home Wednesday night when the police showed up to investigate.
The car was right out front. I told the officer, I said, I have a bad feeling. Every time I go by this car, I have a bad feeling that she is in that trunk and y'all check it. Oh, we waiting on a search warrant.
The car is now gone. Erica's family is convinced she was killed. When they went into the house Wednesday night, they found her coat, her pocketbook, and car keys.
Did see rubber gloves inside the sink. The shower curtain is torn down. There's no sheets on the bed. The house is tore up. The girl don't live like that.
Erica's family says they will be organizing a search party tonight. In the meantime, the police are putting out a news release describing Erica's car, a missing red Ford Taurus with a multicolored door. If anybody sees that, the police want you to call them right away.
One of Erica's aunts used the Find My app to see if she could get hold of Erica's last location according to her phone. This led everyone to a restaurant, but after looking in the bins outside and around the area, they determined that neither she nor her phone was there. Her cousin Barbara begged the manager to let them watch the CCTV, but there was no sign of Erica on any of the cameras. There was, however, some footage of Kyle, Kaylee and Amira from a few days before. The tapes were handed over to the detectives, who at this point were seeing red flags everywhere. They knew that Kyle had something to hide. He had been evasive from the start, and his story kept on changing. They also learned that Kyle was now out on a drugs binge with a sex worker, whom he had brought back to the couple's apartment. According to sources, he even told her she could go through Erica's wardrobe and take whatever she wanted.
Erica and Kyle got married last summer. Her friends and family say they later found out he had just recently gotten out of jail. Court records show Crosby has a lengthy rap sheet for drug offenses and aggravated assault.
Police didn't have enough to arrest him on suspicion of murder, but they did have enough to file charges against him for child endangerment. On January the 10th, 2015, given the state of the apartment and the way the girls had seemingly been left to fend for themselves for 8 days, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Fortunately for the team, Detective Rayner, who was heading the investigation, received an unexpected call. It was Kyle's father, and he said that his son had called them off of a random number that morning. He handed the number over, and this pointed police to a convenience store in Maryland. Using this location, they managed to get a hit on Erica's car license plate. It had been seen driving down the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Finally, they were narrowing in on Kyle Crosby. A bolo, otherwise known as a be on the lookout, was put out for the car. An off-duty police officer driving around Maryland soon spotted the car with Kyle driving it. He attempted to pull him over, but before he could do anything, Kyle jumped out of the car and ran off. After police caught up to him, he was officially charged with 2 counts of child endangerment.
The husband of a missing Burlington County woman is in police custody and being questioned this morning. Kyle Crosby was taken into custody in Brooklawn, Camden County near Route 130. This happened last night after police spotted his wife's car. NBC 10's Jesse Gary is live outside the Mount Laurel police station with more.
Erica Crosby's family members were here at the police station during the overnight hours, but they have since gone home. Kyle Crosby is still being held here by police, but investigators won't say if he has been charged. Crosby was handcuffed and put in the back of a police car overnight in Brooklawn. This after he tried to run following police questioning about his wife's disappearance. Erica Crippen Crosby last seen late last month with her husband at a Cherry Hill restaurant. Her family says they found her coat, purse, and keys inside her apartment.
We going through my sister's stuff, and we just find so much stuff that she didn't tell us, and it just hurts me because I can't hold my sister. I can't tell my sister I love her.
They seized the Ford Taurus, and a forensic examination began on it. Police uncovered several items from inside that they believed had significant evidentiary value. Duct tape, a shovel, a bag of cement, and several used air freshener canisters. They now believed that they had enough circumstantial evidence to charge Kyle Crosby with the murder of his wife. He was held on a $1 million
What just happened? What?
Her family last night was relieved that Crosby had been taken into custody, but we're still looking for answers.
I'm glad that they got him. I just want him to come forward. I want him to come forward and tell who she is. I'm so glad that you guys got him.
But they still didn't have Erica's body, and they had no idea where she might be. After looking in the glove box of the car, they found a GPS device, and the hope was, if this was plugged in, the data would be able to tell them where he went and when. The GPS device contained over 8,000 points over a few hundred miles. These points showed where the vehicle had come to a stop. Detective Rayner said it was essentially like digital breadcrumbs being dropped. They limited down the points to anywhere the vehicle had stopped for 10 minutes or longer, believing that if Kyle had moved and left Erica's body somewhere, it was likely it would have taken longer than a few minutes. Going through everything and eliminating certain points was a mammoth task, and while the team worked on this, Kyle's phone was also looked at. They found 15 messages between him and his mother Jo that had been deleted. Detective Rayner said the messages were disturbing, to say the least. On December 31st, the day police believed that something had happened to Erica, Kyle was actually texting his mother in real time as a fight between the pair was going on. At 3:20 a.m, a message from his mother read, "Please do not touch her in any way or form." 13 minutes later, Kyle replied and said, "I'm not that stupid." 4 hours later, at around 7 a.m, Jo's phone had pinged off of a tower near to the couple's apartment. Jo hadn't mentioned any of this to the police, and she was asked to come to the station and explain it. She bluntly told them if they checked her phone, they would find many more deleted messages between her and her son. She said she assumed they would have already found them and didn't feel the need to mention it. Police were convinced that she knew what had happened and was trying to help her son cover it up.
Of a South Jersey murder suspect has been charged with helping her son conceal his wife's body. 67-year-old Joe Crosby was arrested at her Sicklerville home this morning. She has been charged with hindering apprehension and tampering with physical evidence. Though Burlington County prosecutors wouldn't elaborate, they maintain Crosby helped her son hide his wife's remains.
Police raided the parents' home of a South Jersey man who was charged with killing his still missing wife. Police, along with the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office and Child Services, removed the couple's 2-month-old from Kyle Crosby's parents' home in Gloucester
This is the
Township
second time.
last night. They also removed bags of evidence.
It's the
Police
mother
also searched
that's
the house
hiding
and
something.
a backyard shed.
Joe Crosby was also charged with tampering with evidence. She was held on a $12,500 bail,
One
posted
sec.
10% of it, and was let out.
Well, it's been over a month now. We know she had a heart condition, so, you know, we can only expect the worst as our family. So
Hola. You was in the car.
want is her body.
Just tell us where Erica is. We just want Erica's body. We know that he's committed a crime. There's evidence, enough evidence to state that he has done that, and I just want him to tell us where she is.
Neighbors said sometimes they heard the couple fight.
She never shared that with us. She's always kept him positive.
He was gone for 5 days, and we verified by various surveillance and other means that he was as far away as Baltimore, Maryland, and places in Delaware.
Erica's family says they are willing to forgive Crosby. They just want him to let them know where the body is, but law enforcement sources tell us he is not cooperating. Crosby is now being held on $1.2 million bail.
The data on the GPS device was being looked at, alongside Google Maps and Street View, to see if any of the points looked like somewhere Kyle might have tried to hide Erica's body. One spot caught their attention right away. It was in the middle of Maryland, near a long country road. A quiet, rural area amidst a forest. Kyle's car had stopped there for 5 minutes one night, and then for 14 minutes a couple of nights later. Just a short walk away from the road the car had stopped on, Erica's body was found under some branches. She was wrapped in a blanket. Her arms, legs and neck were bound with electrical cord, and duct tape was across her mouth and nose. Although the cold weather had often hindered the search, police were now actually grateful for it. Despite detectives thinking she had likely been dead since New Year's Eve, her body was well preserved, as was any evidence around her, and this was all down to the freezing temperatures and the snow.
My sister was a remarkable woman. She cared. She was a good mother. She was intelligent.
In her heart, Janiyah Crippen knew her sister was gone. Domestic violence also killed their mother years ago. She's just thankful her sister will get a proper burial.
She always said that
After a lengthy time for the family, just waiting for some sort of conclusion to the case, it was announced that Kyle Crosby would plead guilty. In December 2015, he pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter and hindering apprehension. As part of his plea deal, his mother's charges were dropped, as were the charges of child endangerment.
A Mount Laurel man has been sentenced to 31 years in prison for killing his wife. 29-year-old Kyle Crosby pleaded guilty to strangling Erica Crippen on New Year's Eve last year.
One day, you will find that your hearts forgive me. I ask God to forgive me. I'm sorry for my actions. I miss Erica, my wife.
I'm talking about forgive me. Get out of here, dude.
Kyle, to be honest, the choices that you made caused Erica's death, and you have taken someone so precious from us. But I will continuously raise Kaylee with the same love and passion that Erica would have raised her with.
Crosby got 28 years for aggravated manslaughter and 3 years for hindering police. He has to serve 85% of that sentence.
Detective Rayner said he wanted to believe Kyle's tears were genuine, but he couldn't help but think they were more for himself than anyone else. After he was sentenced, Erica's Aunt Sonia said, "We can finally move on. We can just be there picking up the pieces for the children." Today he really showed remorse. He did care for her. He did love her in some way.
Bro.
It's God has a plan for us all. We don't know when we're going. When we come in, we don't know when we leave. All I can say is I'm glad I have my family's support and the love, and we will always remember Erica.
Heard him speak and say anything about her, positive, and it was just awesome to be able to hear him say that. We knew it the whole time.
And what was it like seeing him break down and sob? I don't know if you guys could see him sobbing.
I was actually glad because that's the Kyle we know.
Yeah.
The Kyle that we've been seeing here for the past year in courts is not the Kyle we knew.
Yeah, better than me.
Erica's cousin said the best thing anyone could do following this was maybe take something away from it. Be honest with their loved ones and let them help you, she said. There's signs in the beginning of relationships. Act on those signs and don't be afraid to leave, she said. Erica's oldest daughter, Amira, now lives with her father, Hameen, and Erica's Aunt Sonia and Uncle Kanye adopted Kaylee. Her Aunt Sonia said that Erica told her that if anything were to happen to her, she wanted to be cremated and put into lockets so that her daughters could wear her close to their hearts. Erica's family never gave up and were relentless in their efforts to find Erica and the truth. Detective Rayner said, "I've been a homicide detective for almost 10 years, and it's rare that I've ever experienced a family as involved in looking for their missing loved one as Erica's family was. I have a lot of respect for them, and I'll never forget that grit and that tenacity that they showed in trying to find Erica." Erica was a loving, hard-working mother, giving everything she could to her children, husband, and family, dedicating so much to her dreams of one day being a doctor. Barbara said she feels like Erica is never far away, and that's thanks partly to how much her daughters are like her. She said, "Amira remembers a lot, more and more every day she's looking like her. She laughs like her. It's like having Erica back in the house."
What's up? Hmm. Yeah, man. The Dragon 2 sucked, but
And then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. Jesus Christ, who's got school buses? Department of Transportation?
School board.
All right. I'm gonna need elimination prints from your staff. Is anyone here that didn't touch this letter?
On my way back to my desk, I got phones if you want.
You need to get matches on blood and fabric. I'll call Napa and Vallejo, get the letters up to Sherwood and Sacramento.
Dave, just one thing. Is it true they got a print off the cap?
Yeah, they got a partition in blood. But that is not for publication.
Oh, hey, come on. Hey.
Victim or survivor attached to that charge.